We're now on to a very significant topic that we haven't covered at all, actually, during this event, which is a big part of downstream. It's to talk about supply chain and supply chain issues. And we've got an absolutely stellar lineup for this. And I really hope you'll look forward to this panel. It's titled Building Supply Chain Opportunities and Resilience, which is very important, challenging the status quo. It's moderated by the excellent Shannon Katcher, who's been on a few of our events, and she's always extremely well versed when it comes to the panel sessions. So I'm really looking forward to that. Shannon Katcher is the Executive Director, Digitalisation and Data for the Gas Technology Institute. So really looking forward to it, and over to you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's a pleasure to be with this panel today. As Adam said, I'm Shannon Katcher. I lead our data and digitalization team at GTI. We're a nonprofit research organization with over 80 years of experience in energy systems across the supply chain. I'm delighted to introduce this panel who collectively bring many decades of experience, bringing diverse perspectives across energy systems, supply chain management, implementing real game-changing digital solutions throughout their organizations. And at a time when energy systems of the future have so much uncertainty around them, experts like these folks have really been thinking about how to challenge existing business models and operate differently, especially when it comes to coping with such rapid changes and fluctuating demand and entirely new and deeply decarbonized energy products that are ever increasingly going to be a part of our future. So with that, I'd like to let the panel introduce themselves, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Dan.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the call today. I'm Dan Rigby, Business Development Director within Wood, within the consultancy team. Been with the business for over 20 years and worked across a number of different sectors in energy markets. I think, Wood are a global engineering consultancy company with over 40,000 people working for us across 60 different countries and working heavily within the downstream market. So really looking forward to the panel today.
Thanks so much, Dan. Jan, I'll ask you to go ahead and go next.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm really excited to join this panel with Future Downstream today. My name is Jan Shumate. I'm with Eastman, a specialty materials innovation company. I lead our worldwide engineering and construction solutions organization and our corporate manufacturing automation transformation. So in my role, we've been working for the last several years on digitalizing and automating our work processes, our facilities, all around the world. So it's very exciting to be part of this panel and engage in the discussion today.
Thanks a bunch, Jan. Panos, I'll ask you to go next.
Thanks, Shannon. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Panos Tsiakis. I'm the business IT director for applications in Hellenic Petroleum. My background was consulting, switched over to the industry a few years ago, and really excited to be participating in this panel where IT and digital in general can make such a difference in modern supply chains, able to respond to the challenges they are facing. Thank you.
Thank you. Can't wait to touch on some of those concepts. Thomas, I'll ask you to go next.
Yeah, I come from Linde, as you might know, the most valuable chemical company of the world. So just in terms of market cap, 4 times Dow or 4 times BASF. And one of the reasons that this company, I think, is so successful is because we have kind of, over the last 20 years, perfectionized, let's say, energy efficiency and sustainability. We build plants. We run more than 1,000 plants out of 10 remote operating centers. And I'm running a business unit that basically sells the know-how, how to do that, let's say, how to improve energy efficiency through services and mostly database services, and how to improve reliability. In my last job, I was responsible for the Asia Pacific operations of Linde, across 18 countries, including China, India, Australia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and a couple of others. And there basically we were running 130 plants across 15 countries from one control room in Kuala Lumpur, where one engineer was running 10 plants. And you can imagine the amount of, let's say, data and supply chain management that we need to do, not to mention the 2,000 trucks that were transporting our products.
Thank you, Thomas. And we'll wrap it up here with Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, it's great to be on this panel today. I always enjoy these panels to learn as much as I can. I have been working in the energy industry for more than 40 years, upstream, downstream energy facilities, multi-billion-dollar projects. And the last 2 years, I've set up a company called Stellae Energy to help people in the energy transition, but also to own some hybrid energy assets, renewable energy, geothermal, solar, wind, hydrogen, things like that. So glad to be on the panel.
Thank you all for that introduction. And Dave, maybe I'll stick with you for a minute here. Something that you said and we had the pleasure of talking about earlier when we met, talking about how our carbon footprint is increasingly a part of supply chains and something that we have to monitor, especially as we have different operating models. And also just noting that I really appreciate the way each of you have challenged the status quo, to go back to the title, and what you've done at your organizations to implement necessary changes to make these meaningful things possible. But Dave, how can downstream facilities improve the carbon footprints of supply chains?
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. Great question. And a little bit controversial. I think the world doesn't very well calculate carbon footprints, scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions, and what should be considered for a particular entity. And even, the switch over from oil and gas to eventually a higher percentage of renewables in the energy mix, people still don't understand that when you have a supply chain from the other side of the world to wherever you're located, there's a large carbon footprint just to get the products to you, the raw materials or whatever. So downstream industry is obviously quite aware of this, that they have feedstocks that they are sourcing. And so the farther away the feedstock comes from, the higher carbon footprint. But the problem isn't just the carbon footprint of these inputs. It's also what kind of carbon emissions you might be generating during your process. And then as your products go out the door, the finished products and everything, people want to know, what's the carbon footprint of this product? Can you advertise that you're producing net zero refined products or not? And that's gonna affect your right to produce inside some countries. It's going to affect things like carbon taxes. It's going to affect your ability to attract funding and finance. Some customers are going to want to pay a premium even for net zero. So the idea that we have a comprehensive way to measure footprints and properly track them they can be audited and independently verified. I think that's really important for our industry. Thanks.
Really great insights. And I think that brings up a good point where we need to be looking at the supply chain, not only of the gases and fuels that move through our infrastructure, but also the infrastructure itself. We need to be understanding how to track information like carbon footprint as it moves throughout the supply chain, and understand what we're buying with increasingly more demand on low carbon solutions. So Dan, maybe I'll direct a question in your direction. Tracking this information and understanding how to capture the right data for the right materials, gases, fuels, that requires some robust digital backbone. And I think that at Wood, you have been thinking about some of those challenges. So can you go into a little bit about how we do a better job of leveraging digital tools to track throughout the supply chain some of that critical information?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Shannon. And I think, the items that Dave was just touching on, is really about demonstrating value and back into the whole ecosystem as well, because it's not just one contract or one person it's responsible for this. I think we all need to look at it from multiple different angles. So I think it would, we've been implementing digital technology, digital solutions for a number of years. And I think one of the things that we're really looking at doing just now is really trying to change our business to business transactions, because that's what a lot of them have been, and we're really trying to move to business to value. And I think for us, it's really trying to disrupt the supply chain as well, where we're actually saying, we can totally change the way that we can contract with an organisation and actually be paid on value that we generate through our digital tools and our knowledge within there as well. So for me, I think some of the things that Thomas was touching on in his introduction, where we're looking at things like reliability and availability, etc. These are big value ticket items for operators, but we need to actually, going back to that ecosystem point, we actually all need to work together to demonstrate that value as well. And I think that's really going to disrupt the supply chain to think differently, rather than having the standard EPC type contracts or standard transactional contracts, which doesn't allow us to maximize value for the operators, but also plus for the clients and the customers on the other end as well.
I love that concept of this ecosystem that we're working within, because that ecosystem contains, as you mentioned, many different assets, many different people, organizations, silos within your own organization. There's a lot to keep track of there. And Thomas, I know that you've done a lot with implementing automations and more of a real-time data component to monitoring infrastructure systems, operations tools. With that comes some challenges with IT and cybersecurity and this exchanging information within this ecosystem, right? I mean, now we're talking about sharing more data. We're talking about working together in new and different ways. How do customers depend on real-time data? Not only customers, but internal operations depend on real-time information, exchanging that information across different silos and vectors, and how does that fit in with IT security of some really critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, Shannon, the point is, I think within the company, it's relatively straightforward because you build a fortress around the company. And I think we have, of course, a lot of, I would say every day, we do some additional stuff to basically fortify the outer wall. When it comes to the service that we do now, the problem is we deal with the large petrochemical companies. We deal with Bush, we deal with Gazprom, we deal with Chevron. And you have very conservative companies that are used to build the same wall. And now the question is, how can you drill a hole in the wall so that basically, for the sake of improving efficiency, you can exchange real-time information, and all of our services depend upon that. So we need every 5 minutes, maybe every quarter of an hour, we need an update, because our task is to run supply chain with, as you were saying in the first place, with very fluctuating dimension, fluctuating power availability, fluctuating raw material, fluctuating prices. And this means we cannot wait for somebody to send us an email. And typically, let's say the initial discussion is, Thomas, using cloud services where we put in DCS data is impossible. And then we go through quite an agonizing process where typically the board of the customer is quite excited as there is a lot of value to unleash. And the operations guys are quite excited because they feel all of a sudden they have somebody who helps them in real time. So they don't need to call, wait for somebody to pick up the phone because we're there. And then let's say we end up with IT, who is completely, I mean, they get the goosebumps as soon as we turn up because they say we've never done something like that. And DCR's data is holy, and this is all business critical information and whatever. But what I have seen, and the funny thing is Corona has helped us a lot because all of these companies now thought about how can they, let's say, use people who are not inside the wall at home or wherever they are in quarantine or whatever, to link them. And this has helped us quite a lot because now the IT operations of the company is able to link other partners. And so we are mostly then dealing with, how to say, legal things. So basically we do a project with BP at the moment. And we had to define every single person of up to our IT provider who is able to see the data, and they had to sign a separate NDA and they had to undergo the full raft of IT security training of BP. But the funny thing is it works. So out of 5 major companies, petrochemical companies, who said it's impossible, with 4 of them we have the approval, and with 1 of them we will get it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a challenging thing to do. It's not easy, but once you do that, I think it opens a lot of doors for what we can do with implementing different technology and operating more efficiently. And Jan, I know that your experience across an international perspective and trying to coordinate and collaborate in different and new ways has really brought you to work with different technology tools to keep that connection and to work together and collaborate in stronger and more efficient ways. I wonder if you can go into a little bit about especially some of the things you were talking about related to mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, and how that enables your operations to be more efficient and communication and collaboration to just work a lot more seamlessly.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate Thomas's comment about the things that we've learned throughout the pandemic and the need to be able to work from wherever we are. And so there's that first backbone of infrastructure you need to have the right information to the right people wherever they may be. And so we're building upon that now, really trying to leverage our subject matter experts around the globe without them having to hop on a plane and only being able to serve one specific need case at a time, that they may be able to resolve 3 or 4 problems throughout the day, or maybe even more, all by sitting in their natural home location. And I love bringing virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality into that equation. We actually have several labs now. We're able in that environment to train operations staff on plant facilities that haven't even been built yet. So they're actually able to walk through, start going through their training, how they'll operate this new facility so they can identify issues before it's built, before it's actually in service. And they're very familiar. They've got extra time in that training. And when the facility does come online, they're not walking into a new facility. They've been in that environment now for 6 months plus. So they know exactly what they're doing, exactly where they're going. And we're able to start up more efficiently that way. I also love the fact that we're able to leverage that subject matter expertise. Again, if someone's got a problem somewhere, we can look into that. We can see that. We can be able to help folks real time and really, really leverage that problem solving capability around the globe. So it's an exciting new day to bring those technologies into industry. They're not necessarily new technologies. So many of our new employees have already been working with these tools, or in a lot of instances playing with these tools in the gaming environment as part of their out of work lifestyle. So it's really nice to bring those capabilities, include everyone, and be able to use that for a competitive advantage to move our industry forward.
I think that, that brings up a really important point, is that technology is such a huge part of each of our personal lives. And I think that that's helped us to accelerate the acceptance of new technologies. I also think it's still just a challenge that we're learning every day with going back to what Thomas said, understanding how we increase the resiliency of our cyber infrastructure and protect it as we work together in new and different ways. But knowing that we have so much of this technology in our personal lives and bringing it into the new expectations of how we use technology in our professional lives as well, and how that actually is a core part of what we do today. We can't really live without it, especially after what we just went through with COVID. So, Panos, a question in your direction. With all this interoperability, it's such a huge factor across the supply chain. Digital tools are helping us in real time sort of dynamic to help us understand what's going on, how our operations could be more efficient, where we can be more productive. But it's such a huge factor in new energy systems, has implications in our ability to scale. What are some of the ways that you recommend that we can leverage digital tools to increase that interoperability across the supply chain?
Yeah, just before I go that specific question, two comments on the previous, on what Thomas mentioned, what John mentioned. Effectively, the whole digital transformation is evident on what Thomas said. We have new business models being built. The companies used to have a fortress and didn't know who their customer were. So now, for example, Linde sees BP as a customer, BP sees Linde as a customer, and they're trying to find ways to create value within this supply chain. And this is really digital transformation. So these challenges of breaking through barriers, breaking through walls is going to be on a daily basis. It's all because new business models are being defined every day. And going to John's comment, here you see that digital technology and IT are driving digital twins. So they're starting from a digital view of the manufacturing plant, and then the physical one will come. So initially you have a digital twin, a static digital twin of the plant, not very smart, but still a digital twin. You can make it smarter as you go along. And that's where the real-time data will come. So you have your static model, you start building your sensors data into it, you start making it more dynamic. Then you can share this data with your maintenance contractors if you want. So really the whole way of operating has changed. So data is the driving force. Ways of integrating the data is the kind of let's say the arteries of this network. And the way to start is by building small pilots, start doing small proof of concepts and see how you can utilize this data. Scaling up usually is not a huge problem as long as you are agile enough to adjust to the challenges. So you will be hearing the word agile when people are doing lots of projects. That's what it's all about. Starting small, having a big picture in your mind, and trying to scale as fast as possible, learning from potential small failures.
Yeah, really important. I think I do think people get stuck in that proof of concept phase. But I think you're correct. Bless you. I think you're correct in that we can learn how to scale faster by being more agile and more flexible with how we implement these solutions. And I do want to go back to existing facilities because we have trillions of dollars across the globe in existing infrastructure. We're pushing the limits of that infrastructure by operating differently. And David, maybe this is a question for you. How can we improve asset performance and monitoring to brownfield facilities, including things like maybe detection of emissions and such that we're starting to care more and more about?
Yeah, a great question, Shannon. Obviously, probably I don't know what the percentage would be, but it must be like 90% of our facilities are brownfield. And the question was asked earlier today in another panel where people were saying, well, how do I do this? I've got an old DCS system. Now I have all this potential other data. So we have a lot of additional data that we can get. We have wireless sensors that don't have to go through the hardwired systems. So the hardwired systems are usually focused on safety and control, whereas asset integrity might have 7 times more data to gather. And in the past, maybe it wasn't even gathered. You're counting on people doing manual rounds and recording stuff, but we have the ability to capture that data and bring it back. And so we have wireless sensors for emissions. There's even some really nice technology where there's little patches that you would go and stick on a flange or on a bit of pipe or something, and it changes color. These patches are designed to be sensitive to specific chemicals or types of ranges of things. You can have those, but I think as an end user, I still haven't heard the good solutions of if I'm in a control room and it's an older control room and older systems, older human machine interfaces. Now I've got all this extra data. How do I get it to the guy where it's easy? If I just give it to him in some big data file or a database, humans aren't very good at that. So it has to come back in a format where humans can spot this information and understand what they're doing. Obviously, we'll try to automate control systems with AI and machine learning to try to handle some of these things more automatically, but there's still going to be humans that need to digest information, and that's a challenge on these brownfields. So we have ways to go get the data, we have ways to bring it back. Now, how do we get it for them to visualize? I think that's still a challenge.
And I think,
So
David,
I'm counting on Dan. You got to come up with those solutions.
Yeah. And I think, David, what I see is, as you said, I mean, typically the control system you can't touch because everybody gets quite excited if you do that. And I think this second layer, which is basically a completely different infrastructure that rather comes from an office environment or from home automation or these kind of things, can then be basically the part where you have lots of data, you don't worry about security or safety. So if it falls down, okay, so what? And you use basically office tools. So basically we have a large cooperation with Microsoft using basically the tools let's say their visualization tools or their data collection tools, so that we can build these dashboards or these trends or whatever we need without going into this really, how to say, old-fashioned, high security, very expensive control system infrastructure.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and add there as well, Thomas. I think for me, brownfield assets, there's so much data, so much historical data there, and we can unlock a lot of that dark data, I think, by, using some of the new techniques. But I also think some of these assets, we can't say we're going to do the most newest digital twin technology on a 50, 60-year-old asset. We need to get things that's fit for purpose so we can maximize the return on investment. And I think, some of those things of, being able to utilize a Power BI dashboard and interconnect data within a technology stack, that's things that people are doing on a day-by-day basis as well. And I think you can unlock a lot of data through things like the machine learning and, artificial intelligence as well, because that, that's all in our fingertips now, and we're doing it on very, very old assets and very, very new assets as well. So I think it's an exciting time for the data scientists to extract a lot of this value.
I mean, maybe one aspect, Shannon, is, let's say, we don't want to pull cables in a running plant. So what we have started is also mounting sensors on mobile platforms, so drones or these robot dogs, and bring the sensor to the place where something interesting is happening, which means you don't need to install anything. You just need a connection to this dog or the drone, and then you can transmit it and pick it up.
I think maybe Dan. Oh, can't hear me.
Now it works.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Really great point, Thomas. And I think, Dan, maybe you mentioned in our previous discussion, you need different solutions for different things. I mean, it's so simple, but so true. You think about how, in upstream operations, if an offshore facility, it's easy to say, it's easy to justify, let me say, flying a drone instead of sending people. I think there's still a paradigm shift for other types of operations with getting people used to things like flying drones, right? But we need to start making these technologies interoperable, communicate in different ways and in real time, and maybe pulling on that digital twin thread a little bit further, because I think it's really important and part of this discussion on integrating existing assets with new assets. Panos, I wonder if you can add to this real-time data component and the types of things that we have to do, and to Dan's point, the types of data that we have to be looking backward and analyzing so that we can do more about predicting the future and understanding how we need to adjust our operations and work in a more agile sense.
Yeah, using real-time data is challenging, right? And you need, and especially if we're talking about refining, the amount of data is tremendous. So you have to be selective, and the digital twin needs to be focused in an area that you think it's critical and adds value. We don't have a digital twin of everything. Saying that digital twins help you predict certain aspects. They are actually very important when it comes to the asset performance management, in the sense that it's a place where you actually integrate operational aspects by receiving the real-time data and the performance of the asset, trying to predict when it's going to break down or when it needs maintenance, and all that. So it's key. So in our case, we have static digital twins where we can actually see the plant and understand where an engineer will go. But we're trying to build digital twins of the key plants, of the key equipment, let's say, for example, a reactor or some heat exchangers, etc., which are key to the performance of the company. So if one of those goes down, it will affect the whole operation. So in that respect, we do monitor from various sensors coming from temperature, pressure, etc., even vibrations in many cases, trying to predict potential failures. So real-time data is being collected, is being used. Even more is being recorded in the historian, which we examine cases retrospectively, trying to do some process analysis or use it for other cases, for simulation, for example, etc. But the digital twins are very specific on high-value assets.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. And Jan, maybe I'll put you on the spot a little bit here too to add to that. I think that coming from your experience across the engineering and IT background, you've seen the challenges on both sides of implementing technologies, what it takes to operationalize them. And I'll throw in a little twist here to add in a question from the audience. Vendors that we work with are also being assessed with respect to their operations and how that works and how we measure carbon footprint altogether across the supply chain. So there's no standards to do this, right? There's no standards on how we ask and answer these questions and how we collect the appropriate data to do so. So just tapping into your experience, what are some ways that we can do a better job of measuring across the supply chain with vendors, and our customers have an expectation that we're going to provide that information to them on how we're reducing our carbon footprint and how that's going to affect the end cost to them of these products that we're creating.
So that's a very real element of how we do business today. And I think you've heard everyone on the panel mention that that's important in their line of work. So we're seeing more and more upfront analysis of how we can pull that together from the sensing technologies, and you're starting to see things like blockchain come into play. For our company, we've got several circular economy projects underway. We're looking at blockchain to track materials through that process so that we can know everywhere that item has been touched by a particular vendor, a particular operational process, and we really have a better way to track that throughout. So that's becoming more and more of an assessment with our vendors up front. What are their innovations, their new technologies that they're bringing to the table? What can they offer beyond just the basic service offering? How can they do that in a way that's environmentally sustainable, that's reducing carbon footprint, and truly innovative, and helping us get from concept to product faster, getting an operation online faster, and being able to be a true partner. And I've heard that through the other panelists' discussion today, that collaboration, that partnership between IT, engineering, operations, manufacturing, and those third parties working together, that's so critical. None of us have the magic rule book and the playbook for how to be successful. We're all learning. It's uncharted territory. That's what makes it exciting. So I think that's a key element, and you're just going to have that collaboration, and we're going to see more and more of that as we go forward. I think the other key thing is not to be afraid to try things. I read a quote the other day. I think about the 80-20 rule a lot, but the quote that I saw was, perfection is the enemy of progress. If we wait till something gets perfect, it's probably too late by the time we get it out into the field. And we're going to learn more by getting something that's 80% complete into the working environment and perfecting it as we go along. So I think that's along with the agile thoughts and that we are really developing a new workspace here, that's going to be very critical, to not be afraid to learn as we're in that real-time environment and we're actually moving forward, that we'll get to a better solution with that mindset.
Really great points. And Dan, I wonder if you can add a little bit to that blockchain side and how the role of blockchain helps support, the downstream segments, whether it's smart contracting or other solutions, maybe a means to have more auditable and trustworthy data that we're tracking.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. And, I remember quite a few years ago actually looking at blockchain and smart contracting and trying to line up these things across multiple companies. And I think, with the sustainability being at the forefront of everyone's mind, I think it's an absolute key driver for all businesses to make those smarter decisions with companies that have got a better sustainability pledge, because ultimately that's the world that we all want to live in going forward. So I think that blockchain will play a big part in contracting going forward, and I think getting that global alignment, and if that saves me doing a pre-vendor registration again by having blockchain across multiple companies and everyone being aligned, I think that will save a lot of time and effort from everyone on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think the future for contracting is going to be much smarter, and I think that will help everyone on a day-to-day basis.
Dave, please, yes.
One of the other benefits of blockchain, of course, is also security of the information, the data. A refinery would have a number of different suppliers with proprietary equipment, systems, things like that. And so you have to be careful how that data is shared. People have to be confident that, but having that security also then, as Dan mentioned, if we have it allocated, what kind of data is associated with each supply chain vendor, piece of equipment, whatever, then he can be tracking what he needs to know to help make sure it's being run properly, right integrity, operating window is safe and everything. But equally, however he's able to prove what his emissions are. So, are we going to move to some sort of way of, in the future, of having audits, same way extractive industries use to audit their reserves, mineral or oil and gas? Will we have something like that where your carbon footprint is audited? Perhaps. You have to then have the security of the input and output data that your auditor can see that and certify, yes, that's your carbon footprint, and then also the same for the overall facility. But then proprietary systems can sit side by side, and the people are confident that only their data is their data is not being seen by other people. So that's a benefit of blockchain.
Yeah, I think the data privacy issue is one that I think similar to the way that cloud infrastructure and computing has gone through this shift in acceptance, I think data transparency will also go through more of a shift of acceptance. And I think we're already starting to see that in certain ways. There are a lot of initiatives, mostly voluntary right now, but across the United States and the EU, I think there's going to be more implementation of policy that will naturally force us to share more data and be more transparent about the operations we have across our supply chain, the vendors that we're working with, and the different ways that we're operating. Panos, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about your thoughts on that, or what adding to what others have already said.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon, thinking of this data transparency, I must say Microsoft with Office 365 has done a huge step. And typically we have a huge discussion, is this data safe if we have it in the cloud, and can it be? And then we say, okay, so where are you storing your price lists? And they say we store it on Office 365. So I say this is exactly on the same server. It's exactly according to the same security rules. And I think, Jen, what you were mentioning is that basically we see commercial things that we know from our day-to-day life all of a sudden moving backwards, while before it was the other way around. So people experience cloud and they deal with that every day, and they have their bank data in the cloud. And I think this is giving us the push where, let's say, the personal experience, and be it COVID or be it cloud services that now everybody's using, creates the trust in that this might not be the worst thing on earth to do.
Yeah, if I may add to this, sharing data doesn't have to be revealing all your data. Usually this will come from consortiums where they will agree on a minimum set of data that will be meaningful to report on what you need to report. For example, in trading, the companies are trading using blockchain, but they don't reveal their prices, they just reveal certain fields of the data, let's say, that are important to ensure the security of the trade and to ensure that the blockchain lives and does what it's supposed to be doing. I think the same will be with carbon emissions, the same will be with other parts of the supply chain. As long as there is value, and it seems that there is value coming from a new generation of people who are interested in the green agenda, they're interested in the carbon footprint of the products they're using in the day life. I think consortiums will develop, and they will develop the right blockchain that needs to capture this information and report it as accurately as it can be.
I think that raises a really interesting question in my mind, which is, are competitors, traditional competitors, starting to collaborate? And in what ways? Because I know from my perspective, we work across the industry and we're seeing things that I've never seen before in terms of organizations that would traditionally be called competitors now teaming up and working together in new and different ways to make progress, mostly on the digital side, but in other ways too, also for climate impact. So I guess I'll pose this question to the group. Are there different ways that you have seen traditional operating models change such that competitors are now collaborating more than ever before?
I mean, there's one interesting thing that I noticed is that, let's say, it's even we play different roles in the same game. So of course, traditionally we would be a competitor to large control system, or I mean the likes of Aveva and Aspen. And right now, I mean, we have projects, where we lead the project, and let's say some of them are a sub-supplier or they lead a project. The other party is where we have a lot of the likes of Accenture and McKinsey, which typically for our consulting services would be considered a competitor, where very often McKinsey calls us up and say, look, Thomas, we have a large refinery project in Thailand. We're not seen as competent in the technology. Can you do that part? And so in other cases, we say, look, this is a really difficult business case for us. McKinsey, can you come in and do the business part of it? We'll do the kind of infrastructure and services part of it. And so sometimes, you sit in the public, sometimes you see on stage, and sometimes you stand left and sometimes you stand right in a very dynamic environment with your competitors and customers and partners, and the roles keep changing.
Yeah, I'll maybe just add to that as well, Thomas. So I think going back to what I said at the start with the ecosystem of companies working together, we're doing exactly the same as well. And I think everyone knowing their role that they're going to provide in there, and knowing the value that they can bring to different business cases, use cases, is absolutely important. And I think, going back a few years ago, everyone was speaking about collaboration. I think we were speaking about it. I think now we've put into action, and I think that is because we're generating value through digital products, and we're able to all work on the same platforms to get that desired value that we all want to bring to our clients, on a global perspective. So for me, I think that's the exciting times that we have just now.
And
I think
I could build on that. Oh, I was just going to say, following up from Dan's comment, I think it's very exciting. There's really two spaces that I see a lot of development, as you described in our day-to-day workspace, that value chain. You do see all the partners, the owner operator, the consultant, the EPCs, the software vendors, the true equipment vendors. We're all working together as a true team in that collaborative spirit, because we don't get to do any of these neat, cool things unless there's a payback and a value. We don't do it because it's cool. We do it because there's a payback and there's a value to that. And so we're all united in that, which really opens up an honest, transparent conversation. And for the first time in my career, I've seen truly collaborative consortia type gatherings and organizations, the CFOS organization, CII, where you have all of those same stakeholders, and they're being allowed to open up those curtains and freely talk about what does data structure need to look like to advance to the next level? What is the role? How can we all play together to continue to incrementally improve that value chain?
And I think it's also, I think, Jen, you were relating to that. It's also interesting the role of customers change, because very often we have a project where we don't know what the target is, because we do an iteration and we say, this is the direction we go. And of this 80-20 rule, I'm referring to that. So we say, that's basically what we want to achieve. We don't specify, what the result will be. And we then have customers who say, look, Thomas, this is really cool. Can we make a product out of that together? And we'll market it in our space and you market it in your space. And so all of a sudden a customer becomes a partner, or a customer becomes a distribution channel.
Yeah, really great points. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the customers are changing, the operations are changing, the energy providers are changing. And, we have to constantly keep a pulse on how these changes are going to impact the ways in which we operate and the ways in which we collaborate. And I think, to me, it's obvious that digital tools play a huge part of that, because what's the best way to reduce really complex situations? It's to leverage the appropriate technology, but applying the technology, Jan, to your point, to the value proposition that it serves, not just applying the technology because it's cool, although Elon Musk might argue me on that point. But I think to that point too, I want to hear your thoughts, and maybe Dave, we'll start with you on this one. The technology is mostly there, right? But it's implementing it that can be the challenge. It's the change management, it's the organizational disruption. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the technology, being there ready for us to leverage, and it's just the difficulty of implementation?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shannon. Unfortunately, there's a statistic. I start questioning some of these statistics sometimes, but one that's thrown out is 70 to 80% of pilot programs fail because people were focused on the shiny part, the technology, and they didn't go after the culture. So the guys that have been successful are the ones that actually spent more than 50% of their budget on the culture side. So the organization, hierarchical decision making, agile teams close to the asset, what you're going to do with that data. If you have a big refinery and key data is split up and goes off to different segments and they never talk to each other, then you're probably missing value. You're having tremendous delays. So you have to work on the culture. It's not just you buy some nice shiny thing and you bolt it in and away we go. And you start hearing more, I suppose the last year or two, we've heard more about that in some of these kind of conferences, but you still see these hierarchical companies that, insist on everything. All information is up and down this long hierarchy and all the approvals you need. And you can't try anything. I think you mentioned that before. You have to try. Don't be afraid to fail. Get something out there. Try it. So you have to change the culture.
Yeah, I think, David,
Panos,
I can
any
only
thoughts?
strongly, strongly enforce what you said. I mean, one of my tasks was to remove operators from site and to basically make plant managers accept that their plant is run from a different country. And as we have a very strong geographical organization, originally I was thinking this is an IT problem, networks, IT security. But we spend 80% with HR training and convincing plant managers that they're still in charge because they would go to jail if something happens, and they just outsource a part of it. So it was mostly, organizational psychology that I was doing rather than IT infrastructure.
I think that's another key element of value. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, John, continue.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a key element of value. Along with the change management, the cultural shift, our processes today are built on the tools we've had for hundreds of years. And we don't want to electrify the processes we have in place. As Thomas mentioned, where those people are and what they can go out and lay their hands on today. We really want to refine that process, and we want to use that to facilitate the change management, the cultural overhaul, but streamline that process, adapt the process to the tools that we have available today, because we've sub-optimized if we just electrify what we're doing today.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you mentioned earlier that 80% or 90% of the plants are brownfield. So yeah, brownfield plants have white-hair workers in there who are sometimes very difficult to change. And we might be lacking SMEs, or we might be lacking, but sometimes it's the SMEs themselves that potentially can be the problem because they are too much stuck in the old ways of doing things. So technology on its own doesn't always bring change. Change has to be cultural as well. So a lot depends on the company and the organization. Not so much on the structure, but on the culture of having people trained continuously. And is actually bridging the gap of most of the people have a smartphone. What stops them using a modern control room? Nothing. It's just a mind shift. But it's a journey. You cannot do it in one day. You cannot do it in 2 days. You need to start communicating. You need to train. You need to inform. You need to explain.
And I think,
Really
Panos, imagine a plant manager on an Australian site, 120 kilos, 40 years of experience, who now meets the 25-year-old Malaysian graduate who will run his plant.
Yes, exactly.
Teamwork. Takes teamwork. Thank you all we have about 6 minutes remaining, and I want to give each of you a chance to close out your final thoughts. And I think, Dave, we'll start with you, but first to make just a comment that each of you are, significantly contributing to the disruption that technology can impact in a positive way to all the challenges of supply chain complexity, and especially for our downstream operations as they change, as the gases, liquids, and fuels that we move and produce change and are more dynamic, and we have different customers and different producers. these are the types of conversations that we need to be having, and the types of solutions that, you know, we are really successfully implementing. So I really appreciate all your comments and all the thoughts that you've put into this. So Dave, I'll turn it to you for final closing thoughts, and then we'll work through the panel to give you each an opportunity to close out your thoughts on this topic.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't think the challenge is as much technology as it is how we integrate that into our organizations and our brownfield facilities. So these kind of conferences are great ways for people to share what works, what doesn't work. We have to learn from other industries, extractive, upstream. We had, built structure community. There's a lot for us to learn from other people, and I think we're doing that. So I'm optimistic.
Great. Thomas, maybe I'll ask you to go next.
Yeah, I would chip into, David, what you said. I think it's now, and maybe Jen, what you were saying is, we have the technology available in our day-to-day life. We have the smartphones, we have the clouds, we have interconnectivity. And it's probably our task now, let's say, to bring what people know in their life at home, to give it enough trust to use it in their workplace as well. And then build it in a way that it is robust enough so that you can run a critical infrastructure, refinery, and oil field.
Dan, I'll ask you to go next.
Yeah, no, I think it's Dan or Jan, sorry.
Dan.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I think it's, like I said before, I think it's an exciting time for us. There's a great opportunity to be quite disruptive in the supply chain. And I think for me, from listening today, I think we need to try things, but we need to fail fast, and we need to learn from each other. And today's point, from different sectors, nobody's first on this journey. I think we can all learn from each other there as well.
Jan, I'll turn to you next.
And perfect follow-up from Dan. I think it's an incredibly exciting time in the workspace that we live in every day. The technology's there, the appetite is there, the entire supply chain, from the companies we work within, the partners we work with, and our customers, and the world as a whole are craving new, better, efficient, disruptive ways to get work done. So the demand is there. There's a huge steroid injection for having this new way to work. So it's very exciting. And if you're a member of the audience today, you're here because you want to learn. And I think everybody on this panel has reiterated, we all had to learn. We all want to share. We want to learn from others what not to do, what to do. So I'd encourage you to reach out to the individuals on this panel or others throughout the program, because that's what the rest of us have done. So take advantage of this opportunity to reach across traditional lines and elevate your own platform.
Panos, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, thanks. It was a race. It's a sprint. We need to go faster, and we are going faster. We cannot afford to look around and wait and see, which is the usual oil and gas and energy sector wait and see. They have to lead from the front. So it's a sprint now.
I completely agree. I think urging the scalability of implementing these technologies, something that probably doesn't work, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, is probably acting in silos. I think the way that each of us has been successful is by working together, as each of you have pointed out, and also leaning on each other, working with existing subject matter experts. There's a lot of people that know a lot of really great things out there, and leaning on one another, not reinventing the wheel, is a huge part of what we need to do to move forward, but also massively disrupt and shake up the way that we're operating, and not be afraid to do that, not be afraid to fail, and to just keep taking steps forward. And I think that's what each of you have demonstrated today. So thank you so much. I've had a really great time speaking with each of you, and I look forward to continuing these conversations in the future. Adam, with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Wonderfully moderated, Shannon, as expected, but it was such a great panel, because even though there were some issues we've discussed yesterday and today, there were some new issues that were talked about. And I think it was masterfully discussed. I mean, the quality of the participants there, once again, were absolutely brilliant. And I think different perspectives from different companies, having someone like Jan from Eastman Chemicals, and then you had Thomas from Linde as well, and then you had Dan from Wood, and Panos from Helios, and obviously you have Dave Hartell bringing all of his experience together. And I think it made for a really good discussion. I liked obviously how you've got to scale up as fast as possible. Again, it was talked about scaling fast, but moving fast, but failing. It's okay to fail, but just move and move as quick as you can. And I think that again was echoed. And I like the comment Jan made about, look, you know, we're all here on this event to learn from one another, to learn from what people are saying. I'm learning constantly from each of these panels, and I hope everyone else is. And I think that's a good point, just to learn from each other. I think the industry is sort of working together on that as well, to learn more from each other. And equally, what was mentioned in that panel is about collaborations. And I think these left field collaborations now are becoming the norm. So whether it's vendor with vendor, whether it's vendor with supplier, consultant with consultant, it is becoming a regular theme now. And I think that these are no longer unconventional partnerships. It's actually becoming part of the process of how the industry is transitioning. So really good to see that. And obviously being fit for purpose. I don't know if Shannon mentioned this or Jan, but I like the sort of the phrase different solutions for different things. And I think that made sense. But one or two very important points. Agile, which wasn't mentioned at all. It hasn't been mentioned really so much on these panels, and especially on the digital panel. And I was surprised. So first time we've heard that about sort of working in an agile way, which is obviously fundamentally important. But secondly, about blockchain. Blockchain is something that was referenced quite a lot in one of our previous events, but not so much on this one. So it's good actually to see it raised as part of the supply chain, the overall supply chain conundrum that we're all sort of dealing with as well. So, but brilliant panel. Thank you very much for everyone to contribute on that as well.